At exactly 6:47 hours, November 14th, 1944, Commander Marcus Brennan was 3 seconds away from blacking out. His F-4U Corsair hung inverted at 8,800 feet above Leyte Gulf. The engines screamed. The entire aircraft shuddered as he slammed the stick forward into a maneuver no pilot's handbook ever recommended, no instructor ever taught, no sane man ever attempted in combat. Negative G-forces yanked him upward against his harness straps. Blood rushed to his head. His vision tunneled red at the edges. Below him or above him now, the world inverted, the Philippine Sea spun in a sickening arc of blue and white. 2 enemy fighters had bracketed him perfectly. One high, one low. A scissor trap. Textbook. They thought they had him. The wind screamed through the canopy seal. His fuel pressure gauge flickered, oil temperature spiking into zones the needle wasn't designed to measure. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine roared like a wounded animal as gravity worked against every mechanical system designed to keep him airborne. Fuel starvation, hydraulic strain, structural stress beyond rated limits. He didn't know it yet, but in the next 90 seconds, he would either become the first naval aviator to survive a combat negative G-split-S at terminal velocity, or he would auger straight into the ocean at 400 miles per hour. The enemy pilots were already rolling in for the kill shot. No one expected him to survive, not his wingman who'd lost visual contact 30 seconds ago, not the destroyer crews watching from 8 miles out, not even Brennan himself, but 36 kills don't come from playing it safe. And Marcus Brennan had learned something in the cold hangar of his father's repair shop in Duluth, Minnesota, that no flight school ever taught. He'd learned that when an engine quits, when hydraulics fail, when every system designed to keep you alive stops working, gravity becomes the only power you have left. You just have to know how to use it. This is the story of how a mechanic's son rewrote fighter tactics. How understanding machines better than the engineers who built them could mean the difference between death and legend. How 36 kills became 43. How one impossible decision on November 14th, 1944 would save thousands of lives over the next 50 years. But it starts 26 years earlier, in the bitter cold of northern Minnesota, where a boy learned to listen to engines the way other children learned to read. Winter came early to Duluth in 1938. By October, ice had already formed along the western shore of Lake Superior. The wind off the water cut through wool coats and canvas work jackets like they were paper, the kind of cold that made your teeth ache. That turned engine oil thick as molasses, that killed careless men who didn't respect it. Marcus Brennan was 22 years old, the first time he truly understood what his father had been trying to teach him. Thomas Brennan's aircraft repair shop sat on the eastern edge of Duluth Municipal Airport. Single hangar corrugated steel walls, concrete floor stained black with decades of oil and hydraulic fluid. The building leaked when it rained. The heating stove in the corner barely kept the interior above freezing in January, but it was theirs. Thomas had built this business from nothing. Started with a tool chest and a reputation for being able to fix anything that flew. Barnstormers brought him their crashed Jennies. Crop dusters limped in with seized radials. Rich men from Minneapolis flew up in their Beechcraft Staggerwings, trusting Thomas to keep their expensive toys airborne. He never advertised. Never had to. Word spread. If Thomas Brennan couldn't fix it, it couldn't be fixed. Marcus had grown up in this hangar, literally. His first memories were the smell of aviation fuel mixed with Minnesota winter air, the taste of metal and grease, the sound of wrenches on steel, his father's quiet cursing when a bolt wouldn't budge, the sudden roar when an engine finally caught and held. Other boys played baseball. Marcus rebuilt carburetors. Other boys chased girls at the soda fountain downtown. Marcus learned the difference between a fouled spark plug and a cracked piston ring by sound alone. His hands were never clean. Grease embedded itself under his fingernails from the time he was 6 years old. His clothes always smelled like avgas and oil, no matter how many times his mother washed them. The other kids at school noticed, made comments, kept their distance. Marcus didn't care. He had engines. Thomas was a hard man, not cruel, not violent, just hard the way men who'd survived the Great War and the Depression were hard. Granite carved into human shape. He didn't waste words, didn't offer praise freely, didn't tolerate mistakes, but he taught. "An engine talks to you, boy," Thomas said one afternoon in November 1938. They were working on a Stearman biplane, a trainer that had thrown a rod somewhere over Brainerd and limped into Duluth trailing smoke. You just got to learn its language. Marcus was underneath the cowling hands, black with carbon, pulling the damaged cylinder. 22 years old, but still boy to his father. Still learning, always learning. Listen, Thomas continued. He tapped a wrench against the exposed crankcase. A dull thunk, then against the cylinder head, a higher ping. Hear that? Different metals, different sounds. You learn what healthy sounds like. You'll know sick when you hear it. Marcus listened, really listened, not just with his ears, with his whole body. Feeling the vibrations through his hands, the way frequency changed with different materials, the way a loose bolt rattled different from a worn bearing. Thomas handed him a screwdriver. Check the push rods. Marcus worked methodically, testing each rod for play, checking valve clearances. His father watched in silence, evaluating, always evaluating. This one, Marcus said, pointing to the number 3 cylinder. Valve's not seating clean. Hear that tick when I rotate it. Carbon buildup or a bent stem. Thomas grunted, not quite approval, not quite satisfaction, but acknowledgement, the closest thing to praise he ever gave. They worked together in the cold hangar until dark, until Marcus's fingers were too numb to hold tools properly, until the steerman's new cylinder was installed and torqued to specification, until the engine turned over smooth and clean, no ticks, no rattles, no hesitation. That evening, after they'd cleaned up and locked the hangar, Thomas did something unusual. He stopped by the workbench instead of heading straight to the truck, pulled out a pocket watch, old, brass case, tarnished green, chain worn thin. This was your grandfather's, Thomas said. Marcus had never heard his father mention his own father, not once in 22 years. He wanted to fly. Thomas continued turning the watch over in his oil-stained hands. 1917, signed up the day after we declared war on Germany, wanted to be a pilot, wanted to fight from the sky. Thomas opened the watch case. The movement still ticked, steady, reliable. They rejected him. Bad eyes, 2400 vision both eyes. Couldn't pass the physical. Thomas closed the case with a soft click. Broke his heart, so he became a mechanic instead, kept other men's planes flying, kept them alive. Thomas set the watch on the workbench between them. He died in the influenza epidemic, 1919. 2 years after the war ended, never got to see a cockpit from the pilot's seat. Thomas looked at Marcus directly, those hard grey eyes. He gave me this watch the week before he died, told me, mechanics keep pilots alive, remember that. Marcus didn't know what to say. His father had never spoken like this, never revealed anything about the past, never shown emotion. I'm telling you this, Thomas said, because I see how you look at those planes, same way he did, same way I did before I learned better. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. Pilots die, Marcus. They die young and they die stupid, and they die in machines that mechanics built. Mechanics survive, mechanics come home, mechanics have families and grow old and leave something behind, besides a telegram and a folded flag. Thomas picked up the watch, held it out. You got his blood, he said quietly. Maybe you got his luck too. I hope to God you're smart enough not to need it. Marcus took the watch, felt the weight of it. The warmth from his father's hand, still in the metal. He wanted to say something. Wanted to tell his father that he understood. That he'd be careful. That he'd stay on the ground, where it was safe. But he couldn't. Because even then, standing in that freezing hangar with grease under his nails and his father's warning heavy in his hands, Marcus knew the truth. He was going to fly. 3 years later, December 7th, 1941, the radio in Thomas Brennan's shop crackled with news from Pearl Harbor. Marcus was 25 years old. He'd spent those 3 years working in the shop, getting better, faster, more precise. He could rebuild a radial engine in 8 hours, could diagnose mechanical problems by listening to an engine for 30 seconds, could look at a damaged airframe and know exactly what had failed and why. But every plane he fixed, every engine he rebuilt, every aircraft that flew away from that hangar, he watched them go with something close to hunger. The radio announcer's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Japanese aircraft. Multiple waves. Battleships burning. Thousands dead. Thomas stood at the workbench, hands flat on the scarred wood, listening. His face showed nothing, but Marcus saw his knuckles go white. They'll need pilots, Marcus said quietly. No. Dad, no, Thomas turned. Those hard, grey eyes. "You're not going." "I have to. You have to do nothing except stay alive and stay here and keep this business running." Thomas's voice didn't rise, didn't need to. "This is what we do. We fix things. We don't fly them into wars we can't win." "We'll win," Marcus said. "You don't know that." "I know we have to try." Thomas stared at his son. Marcus stared back. Neither man looked away. "I already know how to fix them," Marcus said finally. "I want to learn how to fly them." "Flying's easy," Thomas said. "Any fool can learn to fly. Surviving's the hard part, and you survive by staying on the ground." Grandpa wanted to fly. Thomas's jaw tightened. "Don't. You told me he broke his heart when they rejected him, that he spent his whole life fixing planes for other men to fly, other men who came home, other men who got to live the dream he couldn't have." "He survived," Thomas said. "He had a son. He built something. He mattered. By keeping other people alive so they could matter." Marcus shook his head. "That's not enough." "It was enough for him. It's enough for me. It should be enough for you." Marcus pulled the pocket watch from his jacket. His grandfather's watch. The one Thomas had given him 3 years ago with a warning. "You said I had his blood," Marcus said. "Maybe his luck too. Maybe that means I'm supposed to finish what he couldn't start." Thomas looked at the watch, at his son's hand holding it, at the determination in his son's face that mirrored his own stubbornness. "If you do this," Thomas said slowly, "you do it alone. I won't help you, won't support you, won't be part of it." "I understand. You'll get yourself killed." "Maybe." "Probably." "Maybe," Marcus repeated. "But I'd rather die trying to matter than survive by watching other people live." Thomas turned away, walked to the hangar door, opened it. December wind howled in carrying snow and ice and the promise of a Minnesota winter that would freeze a man solid if he wasn't careful. "Get out," Thomas said without turning around. Marcus grabbed his coat, walked toward the door, stopped next to his father. "I love you," Marcus said. Thomas said nothing, just stood there, staring out into the snow. Marcus left, enlisted the next morning, Navy Aviation, Pensacola, Florida for training, as far from the frozen north as a man could get and still be in America. He didn't go back to the shop, didn't say goodbye properly, just left. And Thomas let him go. Naval Air Station, Pensacola, March 1942. They called it the Cradle of Naval Aviation. Beautiful name for a place that killed men with regularity. The flight instructors had a saying, "Naval aviation has 3 rules. Stay off the ground, stay out of the water, don't trust either one to save you." Marcus learned quickly that flying Navy aircraft was nothing like flying the civilian trainers he'd occasionally taken up from his father's airfield. Those were gentle machines, forgiving, designed to keep amateur pilots alive while they learned. Navy aircraft were weapons built for speed, for altitude, for combat. They didn't forgive mistakes. They punished them. The F-4U Corsair punished harder than most. They called it the Ensign Eliminator. The bent-wing bastard. The Widowmaker. Pilots whispered the statistics in the barracks after dark. 40% training accident rate. More men killed learning to fly it than killed by enemy action in the first year of deployment. The problem was simple. The Corsair was too much airplane for most pilots. 2,000 horsepower from the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial engine, the most powerful engine ever mounted in a single-engine fighter. 417 miles per hour maximum speed, ceiling of 36,900 feet, 6.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns carrying 2,400 rounds total. It was fast, it was powerful, it was heavily armed, it was also a killer. The torque from that massive engine would snap a Corsair into an unrecoverable spin if you gave it full throttle on takeoff without compensating with rudder. The long nose blocked forward visibility during landing approaches. The stall characteristics were vicious, no warning buffet, just an instant snap roll that would put you inverted and diving if you pulled too hard in a turn. And the landing gear, dear God, the landing gear. Narrow track, bouncy oleo struts. A tendency to porpoise on touchdown that could turn into a series of bounces that got progressively worse until the gear collapsed or the prop struck the deck and the whole aircraft cartwheeled into a fireball. Marcus watched 3 men die in Corsairs during his first month at Pensacola. The instructors gathered the surviving trainees afterward, made them watch the crash investigations, made them understand exactly what mistakes had killed their classmates. "Learn from their deaths," the chief instructor said, standing next to the twisted wreckage of what had been a Corsair and a 23-year-old kid from Ohio. Or join them. Most of the other trainees approached the Corsair with fear, respected it, flew it by the manual, stayed within tested parameters, survived by being cautious and conservative and absolutely by the book. Marcus was different. He approached the Corsair like he approached every engine his father had ever put in front of him, with curiosity, with methodical analysis, with an absolute need to understand not just how it worked, but why. While other pilots slept, Marcus studied technical manuals, not the simplified pilot's handbook, the actual engineering specifications, the manufacturer's maintenance manuals, the detailed diagrams showing every system, every control linkage, every fuel line and hydraulic passage. He borrowed tools from the maintenance crews, spent his free time in the hangars watching mechanics work, asking questions, understanding how each component functioned, where the weaknesses were, what the tolerances meant. The other pilots thought he was crazy. The maintenance chiefs loved him. Most pilots don't know a carburetor from a crankshaft, one grizzled Navy mechanic told him. They just know throttle forward makes it go fast. You actually give a damn about the machinery. That's rare. I grew up in a repair shop, Marcus said, hands deep in an engine compartment tracing fuel lines. My father taught me that if you don't understand how something works, you can't trust it to work when you need it. Your father a pilot, mechanic, civilian aircraft? The chief grunted approval. Smart man. Mechanics live longer than pilots. That's what he said. You listened to him. Marcus pulled his hands out of the engine compartment, wiped oil on a rag. I'm here, aren't I? The chief laughed. Yeah, you're here. Question is, you gonna stay here, or you gonna end up like those other kids, lawn dart into the Gulf? Neither, Marcus said. I'm going to understand this machine better than the people who built it, and then I'm going to fly it exactly as far as it can go. Not 1 inch further, not 1 inch short. And that's exactly what he did. Marcus's first solo flight in a Corsair was scheduled for April the 15th, 1942. The morning was clear. Visibility unlimited, winds calm, perfect conditions, the kind of day that made flying seem easy. His instructor, Lieutenant Commander Harding, was a veteran of the early Pacific fighting, 34 years old, grey, already showing at his temples, eyes that had seen men die and had accepted it as the cost of war. You ready, Brennan? Harding asked. Yes, sir. Confident? Yes, sir. Good. Confidence is important. Harding handed him the flight plan. But if your confidence outweighs your understanding of this aircraft, you'll be dead in 30 minutes. You understand that? I understand, sir. Do you? Harding looked at him directly. Because I've seen confident pilots, I've seen skilled pilots, I've seen brave pilots, and I've buried most of them. The ones who survive aren't the confident ones. They're the ones who understand the machine they're flying well enough to know exactly where the line is between possible and suicidal. Marcus met his instructor's eyes. I know where the line is, sir. Prove it. The pre-flight check took Marcus 15 minutes. He didn't rush, didn't skip steps. Checked every control surface, every fluid level, every connection, twice. The other pilots, waiting their turn, watched him with barely concealed impatience. They wanted to get in the air, wanted to fly, wanted to prove themselves. Marcus just wanted to survive. He climbed into the cockpit, strapped in, 5-point harness tight across the shoulders and chest, helmet secure, goggles ready, hand on the canopy rail ready to pull it closed. Took one breath, then another. Slow and controlled, his right hand rested on the throttle. The controls felt familiar now. After weeks of ground training and dual flights with an instructor in the back seat, he knew where everything was without looking. But knowing and understanding were different things. The R2800 engine sat in front of him like a sleeping giant. 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows of 9, 2,000 horsepower waiting to be unleashed, 4 tons of metal and fuel and ammunition that would either fly or fall depending entirely on whether Marcus understood it well enough to control it. He ran through the start sequence, methodical, precise, each step exactly as practiced. Fuel mixture rich, propeller full increase, throttle cracked open 1 inch, magnetos both, master on. His thumb found the starter switch. The engine coughed. The massive 4-bladed propeller jerked, turned, caught. The R2800 roared to life. The sound was physical, a deep thrumming bass that vibrated through the airframe and into Marcus's chest. He could feel it in his teeth, in his bones, the raw power of 2,000 horses straining against the brakes, Oil pressure rising, 60 pounds. Good. Coolant temperature climbing, normal. Manifold pressure steady at 28 inches. RPM 1000. Stable. Marcus keyed the radio. Tower, this is Corsair 27. Request taxi for solo flight. Corsair 27, you are clear to taxi. Runway 09. Winds calm. Marcus released the parking brake. Added a touch of throttle. The Corsair lurched forward. Taxiing a Corsair was an exercise in blind faith. The long nose blocked all forward visibility. You had to S-turn back and forth just to see where you were going. Had to trust your peripheral vision. Had to feel the aircraft through the rudder pedals and the way the tail wanted to swing with each turn. Marcus S-turned his way to the runway. Other aircraft were scattered around the field. Dauntless dive bombers, Wildcat fighters, Avenger torpedo planes. All of them training platforms for pilots who would soon ship out to the Pacific. How many of them would come back? Marcus pushed the thought away. Focused on the aircraft, on the controls, on staying alive for the next hour. He rolled onto the runway, lined up on the center line, ran through the final checks, controls free and full movement. Trim set for takeoff, mixture rich, prop full forward, flaps up. His heart was pounding, hands steady, but his heart racing. This was it. This was the moment, solo. No instructor in the back to correct his mistakes, no safety net, just him and the machine and the fundamental laws of physics that would either keep him airborne or smash him into the ground. He thought about his father, about Thomas, standing in that cold hangar, handing him a pocket watch and a warning. Pilots die. Maybe, but not today. Marcus pushed the throttle forward. The R2800 answered with a scream of power. The propeller clawed at the air. The entire aircraft strained forward against the brakes like a barely contained explosion. Manifold pressure climbed. 30 inches, 35, 40. The engine's roar drowned out everything else. The world narrowed to vibration and noise and barely controlled chaos. Marcus released the brakes. The Corsair leapt forward. Acceleration slammed him back into the seat. The runway blurred. White lines flashed past faster and faster. The tail came up forward, visibility improving slightly. The Corsair wanted to pull left torque from that massive propeller trying to roll the aircraft. Marcus pushed right rudder. Hard. Compensating. Fighting the tendency. 40 knots. 50. 60. The controls started to respond. Ailerons getting bite. Rudder effective. The aircraft transitioning from ground vehicle to flying machine. 70 knots. 80. The Corsair felt light on its wheels, bouncing slightly. Ready? 90 knots. Marcus pulled back on the stick. Gentle pressure. Smooth and progressive. The Corsair lifted off the runway. For one perfect second, Marcus hung in that transition between earth and sky. Wheels still spinning, wings taking the weight, the ground falling away. Then he was flying. The Corsair climbed like an angry god, 2,000 horsepower pulling him vertical. The airspeed needle unwinding, 100 knots, 120, 150. Marcus raised the landing gear, the wheels tucked into the inverted gull wings with solid thunks, cleaned up the aircraft, reduced drag. The climb rate increased. He leveled off at 5,000 feet, throttled back to cruise power, 24 inches manifold pressure, 1,800 RPM. The engine note dropped from a scream to a steady rumble. The Gulf of Mexico spread out below him, blue water to the horizon. The Florida coastline, a thin line of white sand and green palms. Other aircraft scattered across the sky like insects. Marcus allowed himself one moment to just feel it. The freedom, the power, the absolute rightness of being here in this moment, in this machine. Then he went to work. He flew the prescribed training route. Standard maneuvers, climbs, descents, turns, getting the feel of the aircraft, understanding how it responded, where the controls went heavy, where they went light, how much force was required for each input. Everything was perfect. Textbook. Exactly as practiced. Then at 8,000 feet, the engine coughed. Not a dramatic failure, not a catastrophic event, just a single hiccup in the otherwise steady roar. Most pilots might not have noticed, or if they noticed, might have dismissed it. Engines cough sometimes, bit of rough air in the carburetor, nothing to worry about. But Marcus had grown up listening to engines, his father's voice in his head. An engine talks to you, boy. He looked at the instrument panel. Oil pressure good, coolant temperature normal, manifold pressure steady, RPM constant. All the gauges said everything was fine. But the engine had coughed. Marcus felt it more than heard it. A vibration that wasn't quite right. A frequency that didn't match the steady rhythm of 18 pistons firing in sequence. Something was wrong. He throttled back slightly. The engine smoothed out. The vibration disappeared. He waited 30 seconds, then added power again. Back up to cruise. The cough returned. Subtle. Brief. But there. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities. Fuel delivery problem, air in the line, vapor lock from climbing too fast, carburetor icing even though the temperature was too warm. He checked the fuel mixture. Rich, correct. He checked the carburetor heat. Off. Correct for current conditions. He checked the fuel selector. Main tank. Pressure good. Everything by the book. Said the engine was fine. But it wasn't. Marcus made a decision that would save his life 100 times in the years to come. He trusted what he felt over what the instrument said. He pulled the nose up. 15 degrees, climbing attitude. And as the nose came up, as the angle changed, he felt it again. That vibration, that wrongness. Then he understood. Air bubble in the fuel line, just enough to create a temporary interruption when the aircraft was in certain attitudes. Nose-high gravity pulling fuel away from the pickup point in the tank, just enough suction to pull the bubble through the line to the carburetor. One brief moment of fuel starvation, one cough. Then normal flow resumed. The gauges couldn't detect it. The systems were designed, assuming consistent fuel flow under all conditions. But sometimes physics didn't cooperate. Sometimes a bubble formed. Sometimes it mattered. The training manuals said this couldn't happen in a Corsair. The fuel system was designed to prevent it. But Marcus felt it happening anyway. He needed to clear the air bubble. Needed to force it through the system or collapse it or get it out of the fuel line before it got worse. The manual said, if you suspect fuel delivery problems, reduce power, return to base, let maintenance investigate. But Marcus knew maintenance would find nothing. The bubble would work itself out during descent. By the time the aircraft landed, the problem would be gone. They'd run it up on the ground, find no issues, sign off on it as pilot error or imagination. And the next time he took this specific aircraft up at altitude, the bubble would form again. And next time it might not be a gentle cough. It might be a complete fuel starvation. Might be an engine failure at the worst possible moment. Marcus needed to fix it now. Needed to prove to himself that he understood what was happening, that his diagnosis was correct. There was one way to clear an air bubble from a fuel line. Negative G-force. Push the nose down. Hard. Force the bubble to compress or collapse or move through the line by reversing the gravity vector. The manual said, never subject the R2800 to negative G loads. Engine, not designed for inverted flight. Oil starvation will occur. Engine damage possible. Avoid at all costs. Marcus looked at his altitude, 8,000 feet. Plenty of room to recover if something went wrong. He took a breath, shoved the stick forward. The Corsair's nose dropped, hard. The positive G-force that had been pressing him into his seat disappeared. He felt himself lift against his harness. Loose objects in the cockpit floated. The horizon line tilted crazily as the aircraft went light, then negative. His stomach lurched. His inner ear screamed that he was falling. Every instinct said, pull back, recover, get the nose up. Marcus held the stick forward for 3 seconds. The engine roared, smooth, no cough, no hesitation, full power under negative G. Then he pulled back, recovered, level flight, heart pounding, hands shaking slightly, but the vibration was gone. The engine ran clean, perfect. No more coughing. Marcus had just diagnosed and corrected a fuel delivery problem that the instruments couldn't detect using a technique the manual said was forbidden, based entirely on what he'd felt and heard and understood about how engines worked. He keyed the radio. Tower Corsair 27, solo complete, requesting landing clearance. Corsair 27, you are clear for landing pattern. How'd it go up there? Marcus looked at the instrument panel, at the engine gauges showing perfect operation, at the sky around him, at the aircraft that had just taught him it could survive things the manual said it couldn't. Learned something important, he said. He landed without incident, taxied back to the line, shut down. Lieutenant Commander Harding was waiting when Marcus climbed out of the cockpit. You were up there longer than planned, Harding said. Yes, sir. Had to work through something. Work through what? Marcus hesitated. If he told the truth, Harding might ground him, might write him up for exceeding aircraft limitations, might wash him out of the program for violating procedures, but if he lied, he'd never know if his understanding was correct, never know if Harding had experienced the same thing, never learn. Felt a vibration in the engine, sir, inconsistent. only at certain nose attitudes, diagnosed it as an air bubble in the fuel line, cleared it with a brief negative G push. Harding's expression didn't change. You subjected an R2800 to negative G. Yes, sir. 3 seconds, controlled, at 8,000 feet with plenty of recovery altitude. The manual says avoid it, sir. Doesn't say it'll destroy the engine. I calculated the risk. Harding looked at him for a long moment, then walked around the Corsair, ran his hand along the engine cowling, checked the oil drains for any sign of overstress. You know what you just did? Harding asked. Yes, sir. You violated training procedures. You exceeded aircraft limitations. You performed an unauthorized maneuver. Harding turned to face him. And you correctly diagnosed a problem that's killed 3 pilots in the last 6 months. Marcus blinked. Sir, air bubbles in the fuel system, intermittent, impossible to reproduce on the ground. We've had 3 Corsairs go down with unexplained engine failures at altitude. Post-crash investigation found nothing wrong with the engines. We thought it was pilot error. Harding walked closer. You just proved it's a fuel system design flaw, and you proved negative G can clear it. That's the kind of understanding we need, the kind that keeps pilots alive. Marcus didn't know what to say. You grew up around engines, Harding said. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir, my father's shop. He'd teach you to trust what you feel over what the book says. He taught me to understand the machinery well enough to know when the book is wrong, sir. Harding smiled, rare expression on his hard face. You're going to do well in this war, Brennan, if you survive long enough. He turned to walk away, then stopped. That negative G trick. Don't do it again unless your life depends on it, but remember it, because someday it will. Marcus watched his instructor walk away. Someday it will. 2 years later, inverted at 8,800 feet, with enemy fighters closing for the kill and his engine dying, Marcus would remember. He'd used negative G not to clear a fuel bubble, but to weaponize gravity itself. But first, he had a war to learn. Marcus Brennan shipped out to the Pacific Theater in August 1942. He'd graduated flight training with distinction. Not top of his class, he wasn't flashy enough for that. But he'd never bent an aircraft, never failed a check ride, never made the same mistake twice. More importantly, he'd earned a reputation among the maintenance crews as the pilot who actually understood the machines he flew. Who could describe mechanical problems in technical terms? Who listened when they explained how systems worked? Most pilots think mechanics are grease monkeys, one chief told him before he deployed. You treat us like engineers, that'll save your life someday. Marcus was assigned to VF-17, the Skull and Crossbones Squadron, flying F-4U Corsairs off the USS Bunker Hill. 26 pilots, average age 24, average experience 200 flight hours. They were children playing with lethal toys. The Pacific War in late 1942 was brutal. The Japanese controlled vast stretches of ocean. Their pilots were experienced, aggressive, and absolutely committed. Their primary fighter, the Mitsubishi A6M0, was lighter and more maneuverable than anything America had. The Zero could turn inside a Corsair, could climb faster initially, could operate from shorter runways and aircraft carriers. But it had weaknesses. The Zero was lightly built, no armor. Self-sealing fuel tanks in later models, but early versions burned if you looked at them wrong. And the engine, the Nakajima Sakai radial, produced only 1,130 horsepower compared to the Corsair's 2,000. Speed, that was the Corsair's advantage. Straight line speed and dive performance. Marcus learned the trade in blood, his own squadron's blood mostly. The first pilot he watched die was Lieutenant Junior Grade Thomas Kellerman, 23 years old, Ohio farm boy, engaged to his high school sweetheart. Kellerman made the mistake of trying to turn Fighter Zero, got into a horizontal scissors at 8,000 feet. The Zero could turn tighter. Every reversal, the Zero cut inside his radius. Every turn, the geometry got worse. Marcus watched from 4,000 feet above, having learned not to engage at low speed. Watched Kellerman's Corsair bleed energy with every turn. Watched the Zero close the distance. Watched the streams of tracer fire walk across Kellerman's wing route. The Corsair's fuel tank exploded. Orange fireball at 8,000 feet. Pieces of aircraft tumbling. No parachute. Marcus keyed his radio to call it in. Nothing came out. His throat was closed. That night in the ready room, the squadron commander addressed the survivors. Kellerman forgot the first rule of Corsair fighting, the commander said. Never turn with a Zero. Never try to outmaneuver them. We're faster. We're tougher. We hit harder. But they turn better. You get into a turning fight, you die. Period. Marcus raised his hand. Sir, if we can't turn with them, how do we fight them? You boom and zoom, Brennan. You dive on them from altitude. Use your speed. Make one pass. If you hit them, they die. If you miss, you extend away using your speed advantage. Climb back to altitude. Set up another run. Never slow down. Never get into their fight. What if they force us into a turning engagement, sir? Then you use your aircraft's strengths against their weaknesses. The Corsair has better high-speed handling, better roll rate, better diving ability. You use those advantages to control the geometry, vertical maneuvers instead of horizontal, energy fighting instead of turn fighting. It sounded good in theory. In practice against experienced Japanese pilots who knew these tactics and specifically trained to counter them, it was survival by the thinnest of margins. Marcus flew his first combat mission on September 3rd, 1942. He got his first kill on September 7th. By November, he had 6 confirmed kills. By March 1943, 12. By September 1943, 24. And by November 1944, 36. The pilots in his squadron called him Mac the Mechanic, sometimes Grease Monkey. Not as an insult, as recognition that he approached air combat the way he approached engines, methodically, analytically, understanding the machine and its limitations, absolutely, so he knew exactly how far he could push when death was 2 seconds away. Other pilots flew by instinct, by courage, by aggression. Marcus flew by understanding. He knew his Corsair could survive 8 positive G-forces before structural failure, so he pulled 7 3/4, not 8, not 7.5, exactly 7 3/4. He knew his engine could run at 62 inches of manifold pressure for 5 minutes before damage occurred, so he ran it at 61 inches for 4 minutes and 50 seconds. He knew his ammunition load gave him approximately 23 seconds of firing time if he held the trigger down continuously, so he fired in 3-second bursts, made every round count, and he listened, always listened, to the engine note, to the airflow over the wings, to the way the controls felt in his hands. When other pilots heard an engine running rough, they worried. When Marcus heard an engine running rough, he diagnosed it. Fouled plug, number 3 cylinder, slight oil leak from the number 7 pushrod tube, carbon buildup reducing compression on number 12. He'd land, tell the maintenance crew exactly what was wrong, and they'd find he was right every single time. How do you know that? A mechanic asked him once. Because I listen, Marcus said simply. 36 kills, 36 enemy aircraft destroyed, 36 pilots who went into the ocean or the jungle and never came home. Marcus never celebrated them, never painted kill marks on his aircraft, never bragged in the ready room. Each kill was a problem solved, an equation balanced. Him understanding his machine better than the enemy understood theirs. Him surviving because he knew exactly how much his aircraft could take, and the enemy didn't. Nothing more. But 36 kills meant 36 times he'd been close enough to death to see its face. 36 times he'd won. On November the 13th, 1944, the night before the mission that would either kill him or make him legendary, Marcus received a letter from his father, the first letter Thomas had sent in 3 years. Marcus opened it in his bunk, hands shaking slightly, not from fear, from something else, something he couldn't quite name. The letter was brief, his father's handwriting, cramped and precise. Marcus, I heard from the Navy that you're doing well, that you've survived this long, that you're good at what you do. I was wrong about pilots, about you, about what matters. I thought keeping you on the ground would keep you alive. I thought survival was the only thing that mattered. I was wrong, you were right. Better to die trying to matter than survive by watching others live. I'm proud of you. Your grandfather would be proud of you. Come home when you can. The shop's still here. But if you can't come home, if the war takes, you know this, you mattered. You made a difference, you finished what he couldn't start. That's enough. Dad. Marcus read the letter 3 times, then he folded it carefully, put it in his footlocker next to the pocket watch his father had given him 6 years ago. And he cried, not from sadness, not from fear, from something else, something like peace. His wingman, Lieutenant Jake Hendricks, found him there, saw the tears, didn't comment. You okay, Mac? Jake asked quietly. Yeah, Marcus said, wiped his eyes. Yeah, I'm okay. Big mission tomorrow, routine patrol, but you never know. Never do. Jake sat on the edge of the bunk, 26 years old, Georgia boy, talked too much, flew too aggressively. But loyal, good man, good pilot. Mac, can I ask you something? Sure. How do you do it? How do you stay so calm up there? I've seen you in fights that should have killed you. You never panic, never rush, never make mistakes. How? Marcus thought about his answer, about his father's shop, about listening to engines, about understanding machines. I know what my aircraft can do, he said finally. I know what it can't do, and I know exactly where the line is between them, that's all. Just understanding the machine well enough to use every bit of performance it has without exceeding its limits. That's it, just understanding. That's it, Jake shook his head. I've seen you do things other pilots can't do. Push that Corsair harder than anyone else, and you never break it, never bend it. It's like you and the machine are the same thing. We are, Marcus said. When I'm up there, I don't think about flying. I just fly. The aircraft and I are one system. I feel what it feels, know what it knows, trust it completely because I understand it completely. Your dad teach you that? Marcus smiled. Yeah, he did. Took me a long time to understand it, but yeah, he taught me everything that matters. They sat in silence for a moment. Jake, Marcus said quietly, if something happens to me tomorrow, don't. If something happens, I want you to know you're a good pilot, you'll make it home, you'll marry that girl you talk about, you'll have kids, you'll live a long life. Mac, promise me, if I don't make it back, you go to my wedding in my place. Tell her I said hello. Jake looked at him strangely. You mean I should go to my wedding? Yeah, that's what I said. Mac, you're scaring me, Marcus laughed. Don't be scared. Just promise. I promise, but you're coming back. Both of us are. Yeah, Marcus said. Both of us. But the next morning, when they launched at 06:45 hours on what was supposed to be a routine combat air patrol, Marcus felt something different in the air. Something that tasted like endings or beginnings, he couldn't tell which. November 14th, 1944, 06:45 hours. 4 Corsairs launched from the USS Intrepid in perfect formation. The carrier's deck crew watched them go silhouettes against the dawn sky, engines roaring defiance at the morning quiet. Marcus Brennan was Viper lead. Jake Hendricks flew as Viper 3, his wingman. 2 other pilots, Lieutenant Morrison and Ensign Patterson, completed the flight. Young men, skilled enough, brave enough, but inexperienced in the specific kind of violence that waited for them 18 miles northwest. The briefing had been routine. Intelligence estimated 12 to 15 enemy aircraft inbound from Luzon. Standard harassment tactics. The Japanese were desperate now, throwing whatever they had left at the American invasion fleet, supporting the Leyte Gulf operations. But Marcus had learned over 36 kills that intelligence estimates were often optimistic. The most dangerous enemy was the one you didn't count, the one the radar missed, the one hiding in your assumptions. He'd been cautious, but not cautious enough. The 4 Corsairs climbed to 12,000 feet, standard combat air patrol altitude, high enough to dive on threats, low enough to respond quickly. The morning sun climbed behind them, painting the Philippine Sea in shades of gold and amber. Marcus ran through his checks with the methodical precision his father had drilled into him. Every switch, every gauge, every system. Fuel state. Full internal tanks, 237 gallons, plus 2 external drop tanks, 154 gallons each. Total 545 gallons. Consumption at current power, 68 gallons per hour. Endurance 8 hours if he never went to combat power. 2 hours, 15 minutes realistic. Current time 06:52 hours. Bingo fuel to reach carrier 08:57 hours. Maximum mission time 2 hours 5 minutes from now. He filed the numbers away, updated them constantly. Fuel was life. Run out and the ocean became your only option. Oil pressure 64 pounds, 2 pounds higher than spec but within tolerance. Coolant temperature 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal. The R2-800 engine rumbled with the deep, steady note of 18 cylinders firing in perfect sequence. Almost perfect. There. A slight roughness, not visible on the tachometer, not registering on any gauge. But Marcus felt it through the control stick, a vibration at a frequency that didn't belong, like a guitar string tuned a quarter tone flat. He'd noticed a small hydraulic leak during pre-flight, a few drops of fluid on the hangar deck near the port landing gear actuator. The maintenance chief had inspected it, pronounced it acceptable, signed the aircraft off as flight-worthy. Marcus had accepted that assessment, but now, feeling that vibration, he wondered if the leak was hydraulic fluid or something else. Oil, maybe, seeping from a loose connection. Not enough to show on the pressure gauge yet, but enough to matter eventually. He filed that observation away too, monitored it. If the vibration increased, he'd abort, return to the carrier. Better to be cautious than dead. But for now, it was within limits, and there was a mission to fly. Marcus keyed the radio. Viper flight, this is lead. Sound off. Viper 2, Morrison's voice, calm, professional. Viper 3. Jake, always that hint of excitement, like a hunting dog catching a scent. Viper 4? Patterson, young, nervous, first combat patrol. Stay alert, Marcus said. Check your 6 every 30 seconds. If anything looks wrong, call it out immediately. The Japanese are desperate. That makes them unpredictable. Questions? 3 clicks acknowledged. They flew northwest, away from the carrier group, toward empty ocean. Below them, the Philippine Sea stretched to every horizon, beautiful and lethal. 74 degrees. A man could survive maybe 12 hours in that water before hypothermia took him. Less if he was injured. Less if the sharks came. Marcus had seen men pulled from the water, the ones who survived and the ones who didn't. At 07:03 hours, the radio crackled. Viper lead, this is Intrepid Combat Information Center. We have radar contact. Bearing 320, range 40 miles. Multiple targets, count is 15+ repeat, 15+ aircraft inbound your position. Vector 320 to intercept. Climb to Angels 15. Marcus calculated instantly. 15+ aircraft, 4 Corsairs. Ratio 3.75 to 1 minimum. If 15+ meant 20, that became 5 to 1. Not ideal. But the Corsair was faster, better armed, more survivable. If they used their advantages correctly, they could break up the formation. 4 against 15 was survivable. 4 against 20 would be hard. 4 against more than 20. He pushed the thought away. Viper lead copies. Proceeding to intercept. Climbing to 15,000. Marcus advanced the throttle. 42 inches manifold pressure. The R2800 responded with a surge of power that pressed him back into his seat. The Corsair's nose came up, climbing at 2,200 feet per minute. Current altitude 12,000 feet. Target 15,000 feet. Climb required 3,000 feet at 2,200 feet per minute equals 1.36 minutes, 82 seconds. Time to contact at current closure rate approximately 8 minutes. Plenty of time to gain altitude advantage. The other 3 aircraft matched his climb. Good formation discipline. Morrison and Patterson sticking close to his wings. Jake slightly behind, covering their 6. Viper flight, we're going hunting, Marcus said. Remember your training. Boom and zoom. Use your speed. Don't get slow. Don't try to turn with them. 1 pass through their formation, then extend east and regroup. Clear. 3 clicks. They leveled at 15,000 feet. Marcus scanned the sky with the systematic pattern his instructors had drilled into every naval aviator. High to low, left to right, searching for the things that didn't belong. Contrails, glints of sunlight on canopies, dark specks against lighter backgrounds. There, 11 o'clock low, maybe 18 miles out, dark specks against the ocean's blue. Tally-ho, Marcus called. 11 o'clock low, Angels 8, multiple contacts. I see them, Morrison confirmed. The specks grew larger, resolving into aircraft shapes, wings, fuselages, the distinctive profile of enemy fighters. Marcus counted silently, his mind cataloguing each aircraft, sorting them by type, by position, by threat level. 5, 8, 12, 15, 18, 21, 23. His stomach tightened. Viper lead to CIC. Contact has 2-3 aircraft. Repeat. 2-3. Request. Confirm. Static crackled. Then, Viper lead CIC confirms multiple targets. Count is approximate. Proceed with intercept. Additional fighters launching to support. 23 aircraft, 4 Corsairs, ratio now 5.7, 5 to 1. Support launching, but would take, he calculated quickly, minimum 12 minutes to reach this position. The initial engagement would be over by then, 4 versus 23 for the first 10 minutes, then support arrives. If they survived that long, Marcus assessed the formation below. Mixed types, zeros, he counted at least 14. Older, Nakajima 43 Oscars, maybe 6. And 2 larger aircraft that had to be torpedo bombers, G4M Bettys probably, each carrying an aerial torpedo meant for an American carrier. What Marcus couldn't know 20 miles ahead, the Japanese flight leader, a veteran with 18 kills and 2 years of combat experience, was coordinating his formation via radio. The transmission would be intercepted by American signals intelligence units monitoring Japanese frequencies. Translated months later. Filed in classified reports that wouldn't be declassified until 1989. The radio log translated maintain formation discipline. Enemy fighters sighted above us 4 aircraft. Standard American tactics: they will dive from altitude. Do not break formation until they commit. Once they pass reform and continue to objective. Our purpose is not to fight escort fighters. Our purpose is to reach the carriers. Remember this: smart, professional, focused on the mission rather than engaging in a dogfight they'd likely lose. But the flight leader had made one critical miscalculation. He'd assumed the 4 American fighters would make one pass and let them go. Standard doctrine: conserve ammunition, protect your wingman, don't get drawn into extended engagements. He'd never encountered Marcus Brennan before. Marcus pushed the nose down, diving, building speed. The other 3 Corsairs followed in a loose string formation, 4 arrows descending from 15,000 feet. The enemy aircraft grew larger. Marcus could see details now: the inverted gull wings of Zeros, the inline profile of Oscars, the twin-engine bulk of the Betty bombers, and one aircraft, a Zero, trailing white smoke from its engine cowling, falling behind the formation, damaged, struggling. Easy kill. Marcus lined up the gun sight, started to select it as his target, then stopped. Something was wrong. The propeller. Even at this distance, even through the smoke trail, Marcus could see the spinning disc, the blur of the 4-bladed prop. And the rotation rate didn't match. A damaged engine produced less power. The propeller would spin slower. You'd see individual blades at lower RPM. But this aircraft's prop was spinning fast, maybe 2,400 RPM. Full power, not the laboring rotation of a dying engine. The smoke was real, but the damage wasn't. Decoy, lure, trap. Someone down there was smart, professional, using the oldest trick in aerial combat: present an easy target, draw the aggressive fighter down, let the rest of the formation collapse on him from above and behind. Viper flight, the smoking aircraft at their 6 o'clock is bait, Marcus called. Do not engage, ignore it. We're going through the center of their formation. Fast pass. Don't get drawn into pursuit. Morrison keyed his mic. How do you know it's bait, lead? Propellers spinning too fast for a damaged engine. Full power. They're trying to draw us down. A pause. Then Morrison's voice, respect, evident. Copy lead. Good eye. Not good eye, good father, who'd taught him 20 years ago that machines tell you the truth, if you know how to read them. A damaged engine couldn't hide its damage from someone who understood what healthy looked like. Range to target 1,800 yards. Closing speed. Combined 580 knots equals 975 feet per second. Time to firing range 1,000 yards, 8.2 seconds. Marcus counted down mentally, adjusted his dive angle, compensated for the target's movement. 1,500 yards, 1,000 yards, now. His thumb pressed the firing button. All 6 guns opened up simultaneously. The Corsair shuddered with recoil. 60 rounds per second per gun, 360 rounds per second total. Tracer rounds every 5th round. Phosphorus painted bright orange lines through the sky. The smell of cordite flooded the cockpit instantly. Acrid, chemical. Mixed with the hot metal scent of gun barrels heating to 600 degrees. The sound was physical, not just heard, but felt through the airframe, a hammering vibration that rattled his teeth. Marcus selected the rightmost Zero in the formation, held the trigger for exactly 2.3 seconds. His rounds converged at 1,000 feet, the point where all 6 streams of fire met in a cone approximately 8 feet in diameter. The Zero flew into that cone. Marcus saw the impacts, 50 caliber rounds traveling at 2,900 feet per second, each one carrying 13,000 foot-pounds of energy, enough to punch through aluminum skin like tissue paper, enough to shred hydraulic lines, sever control cables, ignite fuel tanks. The Zero's port wings separated at the root, not gradually, instantly, one moment intact, next moment gone. Catastrophic structural failure. The wing tumbled away, the fuselage snap-rolled, violently, uncontrollably, shedding pieces. The pilot, Marcus, caught a glimpse of him through the canopy, didn't even have time to reach for the canopy release. No parachute, no bailout, just impact with the ocean at 300 miles per hour. Kill number 37. Marcus didn't watch it fall. Already pulling up, climbing, extending away, using the speed from his dive to separate from the enemy formation. Ammunition expended 138 rounds, 2.3 seconds times 60 rounds per second per gun. Remaining 262 rounds, Fuel consumption during dive and combat power, approximately 4.2 gallons. Remaining fuel, 538 gallons. Time 07:12 hours. Still well within parameters. Behind him, Jake's guns hammered. A shorter burst, 1.8 seconds. Another zero staggered, trailing smoke thick and black falling away from formation. The enemy formation scattered, discipline breaking down, aircraft peeling off in every direction, some diving, some climbing, some turning hard to engage the Corsairs, exactly what Marcus wanted. A scattered enemy was a vulnerable enemy. Break their cohesion, force individual fights instead of coordinated tactics. Viper flight extend east, Marcus called. Don't engage, regroup at Angels 12. 3 Corsairs followed him, climbing away from the fight, using superior speed to open range. But the Bait Zero, the one trailing fake smoke, didn't run. It rolled inverted and pulled hard, coming around in a split S that positioned it behind Marcus's formation, aggressive, confident. Declassified Japanese tactical documents recovered in 1946 revealed a specific doctrine for dealing with American boom and zoom tactics. Translation excerpt. When American fighters dive through formation, majority will extend away using superior speed. However, if one aircraft can be isolated and engaged during their climb, others must choose, continue retreat to safety or return to assist wingman. Either choice creates tactical opportunity. Isolated aircraft can be destroyed by multiple attackers. Returning aircraft sacrifice altitude advantage and become vulnerable during reversal. The Bait Zero's pilot understood this perfectly. By presenting a tempting target, then turning aggressively when the Americans dove, he'd positioned himself behind their formation during their escape climb. Now Marcus had a choice: keep climbing and let the Zero pursue, or reverse and engage. Marcus checked his mirrors. The Zero was at his 5 o'clock 3,000 yards back, climbing to match his altitude. Not fleeing, hunting. The rest of the enemy formation was scattered below, some regrouping, some still diving away, some heading back toward Luzon mission aborted. The 2 Betty bombers were turning north, escorted by 4 Zeros. Running. The bombers were the mission, the threat. Marcus should let the pursuing Zero go, should protect the bombers from reaching the carrier group, but that Zero's pilot was good, too good to let roam free, and the bombers were already running. Mission accomplished in that sense. Viper flight, this is lead. I've got 1 persistent on my 6. I'll deal with him. 2 and 4 intercept those bombers heading north. Don't let them reach the fleet. Lead, what about you? Morrison asked. I'll handle this one and catch up. Go. Morrison didn't argue. He and Patterson broke away, diving toward the fleeing bombers. Viper 3 status, Marcus asked. 3 is good lead. Got 1 confirmed kill, but I'm picking up engine vibration. Coolant temperature climbing, might be a leak. Damn. Jake's aircraft was damaged, not catastrophically, but enough to matter. Decision tree, Jake needs to return to carrier. Distance approximately 78 miles. His aircraft can manage that if coolant leak is minor, but if it gets worse, he might not make it. Options 1. Send Jake home alone, risky if engine fails. 2. Escort. Jake home, abandon interception. 3. Send Morrison and Patterson to escort Jake. Marcus handles bombers and pursuing Zero alone. 3 head for home, Marcus ordered. 2 and 4 forget the bombers, escort 3 back to the carrier. That's priority 1. Lead, I can make it, Jake started. You've got a coolant leak and 78 miles of ocean. You're not flying it alone. 2 and 4 form up on 3. Get him home. I'll clean up here.
Lead, that leaves you alone with, Morrison began. I know the math. I'll be fine. Go. Now. A pause, then 3 Corsairs broke away to the southeast. Heading home, Jake's aircraft trailing a thin mist of coolant vapor, Morrison and Patterson boxing him in. Protecting him, Marcus was alone.
He turned his attention to the Zero still pursuing him. 2 miles back now, climbing patiently, matching his altitude gain, not rushing, not making aggressive moves, just climbing, maintaining energy, waiting. Professional pilot, experienced, dangerous. Marcus continued climbing, 15,000 feet, 16,000, taking the high ground. The Corsair's power advantage showed. He gained separation. 3,000 yards, 3,500, but the Zero kept coming, slower but persistent. At 17,000 feet, Marcus leveled off, checked his fuel, time 7:19 hours. Fuel consumed approximately 37 gallons combat power during dive and engagement. Remaining 508 gallons. Bingo fuel time 08:57 hours. Current time to bingo, 98 minutes. Distance to carrier 80 miles. Flight time at cruise 24 minutes. Margin 74 minutes. Could fight for up to 60 minutes and still make it home with reserves. But that assumed no further damage. No additional fuel leaks. No navigation errors. The Zero leveled off at 15,000 feet. 2,000 feet below Marcus. 2 miles away. Just sitting there, waiting. Stalemate. Marcus understood the tactic. The Zero pilot was trying to draw him into a disadvantageous fight. Marcus had altitude, had speed, had firepower, but the Zero had maneuverability. If Marcus dove to attack and missed, if he got slow in a turning fight, the advantage would shift. The smart play was to extend away, run for home. The Zero couldn't catch him in level flight. But those two Betty bombers were still out there, somewhere to the north, and Marcus knew from experience that Japanese attack aircraft were capable of loitering for hours waiting for American fighters to leave before turning back toward the fleet. If he let that Zero escape, if he let those bombers escape, how many sailors would die? Marcus thought about his father's letter, the one that had arrived last night. Better to die trying to matter than survive by watching others live. He thought about Jake, about Morrison and Patterson, young men trying to survive a war they hadn't started, trying to make it home to families and futures. He thought about the 3,000 sailors on the Intrepid who had no way to defend themselves except pilots willing to fly into impossible odds. The mathematics said run. Survive, you've done enough. Duty said finish the job. Marcus made his choice. He rolled inverted, pulled through into a split S, diving toward the Zero. The enemy pilot saw him coming, started a climbing right turn, trying to force a head-on engagement where both aircraft would pass each other firing. Mutual destruction gambit if both pilots held their nerves. Marcus didn't bite. He pulled out of his dive at 12,000 feet, 4 miles from the Zero, still carrying massive speed, then climbed again. Back to altitude, repositioning. The Zero leveled off, waiting again. Marcus tried twice more, each time diving to attack. Each time the Zero's pilot demonstrated perfect defensive awareness, turning to neutralize Marcus's attack angle, forcing him to break off or commit to a low-energy turning fight. After the third attempt, Marcus had to acknowledge the truth. This pilot was as good as he was, maybe better at defensive fighting. They could dance like this for an hour, and neither would gain decisive advantage. And Marcus was burning fuel he couldn't afford to waste. Current fuel, 462 gallons. He'd been at combat power for extended time. Time 0731. Bingo fuel 0857. Remaining combat time maximum 45 minutes before he had to turn for home. The math was getting tight. Marcus rolled wings level, pointed his nose southeast toward the carrier. The Zero didn't follow, just orbited at 15,000 feet, watching Marcus leave. Professional courtesy between professionals. We fought. Neither died. Good enough for Marcus, throttled back to cruise power. 28 inches manifold pressure. 1,800 RPM. Fuel consumption dropping to 52 gallons per hour. More economical. Stretching his endurance. The adrenaline was fading. His hands trembled slightly post-combat stress response. Normal. He'd learned to recognize it, accept it, let it pass. 2 confirmed kills today, numbers 37 and 38. Jake had gotten one. The 3 bombers and escorts were still out there but scattered. Mission disrupted. Bombers unlikely to reach the carrier group now. Good mission. Everyone going home alive. Then his engine coughed. Not loud, not dramatic, just a single interruption in the otherwise steady rumble, like a man clearing his throat. But Marcus's hands went cold. He scanned the instrument panel, not with the quick glance most pilots used, with the systematic evaluation his father had taught him, each gauge, each indicator, reading them in sequence, understanding what they said individually and collectively. Oil pressure 61 pounds, 1 pound lower than before, still normal range, but trending down. Coolant temperature 205 degrees, 15 degrees higher than before, still acceptable, but climbing. Manifold pressure 28 inches, steady. RPM 1,800, constant. All the gauges said, everything is fine, minor variations, within parameters. Keep flying. But Marcus had learned 6 years ago during his first solo flight to trust what he felt over what the instruments displayed. He'd felt a vibration during pre-flight, had noted it, had monitored it, and now the engine had coughed.
Connection, maybe? Probably. He waited 30 seconds, listening, feeling the aircraft through his hands and seat, the way his father had taught him to feel engines. There. Another cough. Subtle. Brief. A momentary roughness in the steady note of 18 cylinders firing. Something was wrong. His mind raced through diagnostics, the vibration he'd felt earlier, the hydraulic leak he'd noticed during pre-flight. What if it wasn't hydraulic fluid? What if it was oil seeping from a loose connection or a cracked fitting? Not enough to show dramatic pressure loss yet, but enough to reduce lubrication, enough to create metal-on-metal contact, enough to generate heat.
The R2800 engine was a masterpiece of engineering. 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows of 9, 2,000 horsepower, but it was also unforgiving. Oil pressure was life. The bearings connecting rod bearings, main bearings, camshaft bearings all depended on constant oil flow. Lose pressure and those bearings would fail, usually within minutes. And when bearings failed in a radial engine, the results were catastrophic. Connecting rods broke, punched through the crankcase, the entire engine seized. Instantly, the propeller stopped. The aircraft became a glider, a very heavy glider with terrible aerodynamic efficiency. Marcus checked the oil pressure gauge again. 58 pounds now, 3 pounds lower than 5 minutes ago. Still technically normal, but the trend was undeniable. Falling, he scanned the engine cowling through the windscreen, looking for visible signs, smoke, leaks, anything. There, a thin, dark streak along the lower cowling, oil, dripping from somewhere inside, caught by the slipstream and painting a line along the aluminum skin. His heart sank. Oil leak. Active. Worsening. The pre-flight inspection had missed it. Or it had been minor then and was getting worse now. Didn't matter. The result was the same. He was losing oil pressure. 68 miles from the carrier, over empty ocean, with an engine that might quit at any moment. Current fuel 458 gallons, oil pressure 56 pounds and dropping. Distance to carrier 68 miles. At cruise speed 210 knots, 19.4 minutes flight time. Will oil pressure hold for 20 minutes? Unknown. Depends on leak rate, depends on oil volume remaining, depends on bearing tolerances. Too many unknowns. Marcus made a decision. He advanced the throttle slightly. Not to combat power, just enough to increase speed. 230 knots instead of 210, reducing flight time to 17 minutes, trading fuel for time. Gambling that the engine would hold together for 17 minutes rather than 20. The engine responded. RPM climbed to 2,000. Manifold pressure to 32 inches. Oil pressure? 54 pounds. Still dropping. Marcus keyed the radio. Intrepid CIC, this is Viper Lead. I have an engine casualty. Oil leak. Pressure dropping. Currently 65 miles northwest of your position. If I don't make it back, static cut him off. Then a different voice. Not the calm controller from CIC. Excited. Urgent. All aircraft, this is Intrepid CIC. Multiple bogies inbound from the west. Large formation. Estimated 40 plus aircraft. All available fighters scramble immediately. Repeat scramble all fighters. 40 enemy aircraft heading for the carrier group. And Marcus was the only fighter between them and the fleet. Damaged engine. 65 miles from help. Oil pressure dropping by the minute. He should run. Should try to reach the carrier before his engine seized. Should save himself. That's what every survival instinct screamed. That's what the manual said. That's what a rational man would do. What Marcus didn't know, the 40-plus aircraft were a coordinated strike. The earlier 23 aircraft had been a probing force, intended to draw American fighters away from the carrier group. The real attack, 2 squadrons of Betty bombers escorted by 26 Zero fighters, had been waiting over Luzon for confirmation that American Combat Air Patrol was engaged elsewhere. Intelligence reports from captured Japanese documents revealed the plan. Primary force engages American fighters. Once KP drawn away, main strike force proceeds to objective. Estimated time of American fighter engagement, 10 to 15 minutes. Window for bomber approach, 12 minutes minimum, sufficient to reach American carriers and execute coordinated torpedo attack. The plan had worked. Morrison, Patterson and Jake were escorting Jake's damaged aircraft back to the carrier. Marcus was alone engaged with a persistent Zero far from the fleet. The Combat Air Patrol was scattered, depleted, out of position. The strike package launched. 43 aircraft, 14 Betty bombers, each carrying a Type 91 aerial torpedo, 29 Zero escorts, their target USS Intrepid, CV-11, fleet carrier, home to 90 aircraft and 3,000 men, and the only obstacle between them and that carrier was one Corsair with a dying engine and a pilot who should have been running for his life. Marcus checked his fuel. 452 gallons, checked his oil pressure, 52 pounds, checked his ammunition, 2,262 rounds, checked the distance to the carrier, 63 miles, checked the distance to the incoming strike package the bearing CIC had given, approximately 40 miles west, did the mathematics in his head, the cold, brutal mathematics of aerial combat. If he ran for the carrier at maximum cruise speed, he'd arrive in 16 minutes. The engine might hold together that long. Probably would. He'd land, refuel, rearm, take off again. The entire cycle would take maybe 30 minutes. By then, the strike package would be over the fleet. 14 bombers dropping torpedoes. The Intrepid had close-in defensive weapons, 5-inch guns, 40mm Bofors, 20mm Oerlikons, but torpedo bombers attacked from multiple angles simultaneously, coordinated, overwhelming point defenses. How many torpedoes would hit 235? 1 torpedo could cripple a carrier. 2 would probably sink it. 3 would definitely sink it. 3,000 men. Jake, Morrison, Patterson. The maintenance crews who'd kept Marcus's aircraft flying, the cooks and medics and admin clerks and radio operators, young men who'd enlisted to serve their country, who had families waiting at home, who had futures they wanted to live, all dead because Marcus chose survival over duty. Or he could turn west, toward the strike package, engage them, buy time for other fighters to scramble from the carrier, maybe slow the bombers down, maybe scatter them, maybe kill enough escorts that the bombers would abort with an engine that was losing oil pressure. That might quit at any second. That would almost certainly fail before he could reach the carrier afterward. Survival probability if he turned toward the enemy less than 10%. Survival probability if he ran for the carrier 80%, maybe 90%. But Marcus thought about his father's letter, about the grandfather who'd wanted to fly but never got the chance, about 3 generations of men connected by engines and aircraft and the need to matter, thought about the pocket watch in his footlocker, the one he'd been superstitious about carrying on this mission, the one that had survived World War I. That represented legacy, continuation, purpose. Thought about Jake's wedding, about the promise he'd made, about being best man at a funeral if necessary. The mathematics said, run, save yourself, you've done enough. Duty said, turn, fight, make it matter. Final calculation, fuel 450 gallons, ammunition 262 rounds, oil pressure 50 pounds and dropping, enemy aircraft 43, odds of survival 8%, odds of making a difference unknown, but greater than 0. Marcus Brennan had spent his entire life understanding machines, understanding their limits, understanding exactly how far he could push them before failure. He knew this engine was failing, knew the oil pressure would hit critical levels probably below 40 pounds in the next 10 to 12 minutes. Knew that when it did, bearing failure would cascade, the engine would seize, he'd be gliding. But he also knew that 10 minutes of flight time could buy the carrier group the warning they needed, could scatter the bomber formation, could kill enough escorts to make the survivors think twice about pressing the attack. 10 minutes to matter, or 17 minutes to survive. Marcus turned west, away from safety, away from the carrier, toward 43 aircraft that wanted him dead. His engine knocked, a rhythmic hammering that meant bearing failure had begun, metal grinding on metal, every revolution destroying components that couldn't be replaced. Marcus advanced the throttle anyway, squeezing every bit of power from the dying engine. The Corsair accelerated, climbing 240 knots, 260, 280, heading directly into impossible odds. Viper lead engaging to, he radioed, voice calm, professional, the voice of a man who'd made his choice and accepted the consequences. If I don't make it back, tell Jake he owes me a wedding invitation. Then he saw them, not 43 aircraft, more. The radar had undercounted, or additional formations had joined, 50 aircraft, maybe 60, a massive, dark cloud against the western sky, bombers in the center, fighters boxing them in, all heading straight for the American fleet. Marcus was 1 Corsair, 1 pilot, 1 failing engine against 60. He smiled, cold and hard, the smile of a man who understood machines well enough to know exactly how much damage one aircraft could do before physics and mathematics and failing bearings ended the equation. He pushed the nose down and dove into the formation. The impact came like a freight train hitting a brick wall, 140 knots to 0 in 0.4 of a second. The Corsair's left wing touched first, just a glancing contact with a 6-foot swell. But at that speed, water becomes concrete. The wing crumpled, twisted, the aircraft snap-rolled left. The nose pitched down violently. Marcus's body slammed forward against the instrument panel despite his harness being released. His head snapped down. Vision exploded into white light and electric pain. Something in his chest cracked the rib sternum, something the pain sharp and immediate. Then water. Everywhere. The cockpit flooded instantly. Crushing pressure. Salt burning his eyes, his nose, his throat. The Corsair's nose buried itself in the ocean. The tail rose vertical. For 2 impossible seconds, 14,000 pounds of aircraft stood on its propeller like a monument to physics and failed ambition. Then it rolled inverted and began to sink. Marcus was underwater. Disoriented, cold, shocking his system. Salt water in his mouth, his lungs. The Corsair rotating around him in the green darkness. Which way was up, which way was out? His training took over. Automatic responses drilled into muscle memory. Find the canopy opening. It was already open. He'd released it before impact. Pull yourself through. His hands found the canopy rail. Pulled. His body didn't move. Something had him, holding him down, the radio cord still attached to his helmet. Marcus's oxygen-starved brain struggled to process this. He needed to disconnect, needed to find the release. His hands fumbled at his helmet, found the radio jack, twisted, it wouldn't release, stuck, jammed. The Corsair was sinking faster now, pulling him down 20 feet, 30 feet, the green water turning darker, colder. Marcus pulled the helmet off his head, left it attached to the radio cord, left it in the sinking aircraft. He kicked toward what he hoped was the surface. His Mae West life vest was supposed to auto-inflate. He felt it trigger. Compressed CO2 cartridges firing. The vest inflated around his chest, squeezing his cracked ribs, making him gasp, which let more salt water into his lungs. But the vest worked, pulled him upward, away from the sinking Corsair. Marcus kicked, clawed at the water, his vision tunneling, lungs screaming, the darkness giving way to lighter blue. Then grey-green. He broke the surface. Air. Beautiful, impossible air. Marcus gasped, choked, vomited seawater, gasped again. His lungs burned. His chest felt like someone had driven a spike through it. But he was breathing. He was alive. Marcus floated on his back, the Mae West keeping his head above water. The sky spun above him, blue and white and impossibly vast. He coughed again, more seawater, more pain in his chest. But breathing, still breathing. He turned his head, looked for the Corsair. Nothing. Already gone, sinking into 3,000 feet of ocean. Taking with it his guns, his ammunition, his radio, everything. Just him, now, floating, alone. Then he heard the sound. An engine, not an aircraft engine, a boat engine. Marcus turned in the water, saw the USS Heermann maybe 400 yards away, saw a motor whaleboat being lowered from the davits, saw it hit the water, saw the helmsman gun the engine. The whaleboat cut through the swells, bow wave white and high. 2 sailors in the bow with boat hooks, the helmsman standing at the wheel, hand on the throttle. They reached Marcus in 40 seconds. Strong hands grabbed his vest, his arms, his flight suit, hauled him out of the water like a landed fish. Dropped him onto the deck boards. He landed hard. The impact drove what little air remained from his lungs. He curled on his side, coughing, choking, trying to breathe through the pain in his chest. One of the sailors, a kid who couldn't be older than 19, knelt beside him. "You okay, sir?" Marcus coughed, spat seawater. His voice came out as a rasp. "Yeah, I'm okay." The sailor grinned, relief and amazement mixing on his young face. "Hell of a way to ditch, Commander. We thought you were going to put it down right on our deck." Marcus tried to laugh. It came out as a cough. "What ship?" "USS Heermann, sir. You just scared the hell out of Captain Hathaway." Marcus closed his eyes, let his head rest against the deck. "Tell him I'm sorry." The whaleboat turned back toward the destroyer. Engine growling, spray kicking up. Marcus lay on the deck and watched the clouds pass overhead. Grey-white against blue. Beautiful. Real. Alive. He'd survived. Against mathematics and physics, and an engine that had quit 60 miles from safety. Against impossible odds and a glide that shouldn't have been possible. Against everything that said he should be dead. Survived. Marcus closed his eyes and let the exhaustion take him. They lifted Marcus aboard the Heermann on a stretcher, even though he insisted he could walk. A corpsman checked him over on the fantail, pupils responsive, reflexes normal, blood pressure elevated but stable, breathing painful but functional. The corpsman's hands moved over Marcus's chest, pressing, probing. Marcus winced. "Ribs?" Marcus asked. "At least 2 cracked, maybe 3. You're going to be pissing blood for a day or two. Probably bruised kidneys from the impact. The corpsman dabbed iodine on a cut over Marcus's left eyebrow. He hadn't even noticed he was bleeding. But no broken bones, no concussion. You're lucky, Commander. Don't feel lucky. You're breathing, aren't you? That's lucky enough. They gave him a blanket. Hot coffee in a metal cup. Marcus wrapped both hands around the coffee, trying to stop the shaking. But the shaking wasn't from cold, it was something deeper, something in his bones. The accumulated stress of the last 2 hours, finally catching up to his body. Captain Richard Hathaway appeared, compact man in his early 40s, grey at the temples, sharp eyes that evaluated everything. He looked Marcus over, then glanced at the oil slick still visible off the starboard quarter where the Corsair had gone down. "Hell of a landing, Commander." Marcus sipped his coffee. Terrible. Thick and bitter and overboiled, but hot and real. "Wasn't much of a choice, sir. We counted 5 separate aircraft in the water on our radar plot before you went down. All Japanese." Hathaway's voice was level, professional, but there was something underneath. Respect, maybe, or disbelief. "You do all that?" Marcus nodded, didn't trust his voice yet. 5 zeros in one sortie." "Yes, sir." "With a failing engine for part of it?" "Yes, sir." Hathaway studied him for a long moment. "You're Brennan, the one they call Grease Monkey." Marcus almost smiled. "Yes, sir, that's me."
How many kills does that put you at?" 41 confirmed, sir." Hathaway shook his head slowly, like he was watching something he couldn't quite believe. "My executive officer saw your approach, said you were gliding dead stick, said you stretched a 15,000-foot glide across 60 miles of ocean, said it was the most impressive piece of airmanship he'd ever witnessed." "I got lucky, sir." "Luck." Hathaway pulled out a pack of Chesterfield cigarettes, offered one to Marcus. Marcus took it. His hands were still shaking. Hathaway lit them both with a Zippo. "I've seen lucky pilots. I've seen skilled pilots. Most of them are dead. The ones who survive understand something the others don't." Marcus exhaled smoke. Felt it burn his damaged lungs. "What's that, sir?" "They know their aircraft better than the engineers who built it. They know exactly where the line is between possible and suicidal. And when they cross that line, they cross it deliberately."
"With full knowledge of what they're asking the machine to do?" Hathaway looked at him directly. "You knew that Corsair would glide 60 miles, didn't you?" Marcus thought about lying, about playing it off as luck or desperation. But Hathaway deserved the truth. "I knew it could glide approximately 28 miles from 15,000 feet at optimal airspeed. I calculated that if I varied my airspeed to maximize time in the air rather than distance, I could stretch it to maybe 35 miles. The rest was hoping the destroyer could close the gap." "You bet your life on mathematics." "I bet my life on understanding the machine, sir. The mathematics just told me the odds." "What were the odds?" Marcus smiled, cold and tired. "About 30%, maybe less." "And you took them anyway?" "Didn't have better options, sir." Hathaway smoked in silence. Below them, sailors went about their duties, swabbing decks, checking depth charge racks, manning the 40mm mounts. The war kept moving, didn't stop for anyone. "You should know your wingman made it back," Hathaway said. "Lieutenant Hendricks landed on the Intrepid on fumes with a shot-up engine. He reported you as missing in action, thought you were dead." Something tight in Marcus's chest loosened. "Glad he made it." "He'll be glad you did too." Hathaway crushed his cigarette under his boot. "We're heading back to the task force. We'll get you transferred to the Intrepid by morning. Your CO is going to want to debrief you." "Yes, sir." Hathaway turned to leave, then stopped. "Brennan, what made you turn back when your engine was failing, when you knew you might not make it home? What made you engage 40-plus enemy aircraft instead of running?" Marcus thought about his father's letter, about mattering versus surviving, about 3,000 sailors on the Intrepid who had no way to defend themselves except pilots who were willing to fly into impossible odds. "Someone had to slow them down, sir, buy time for the other fighters to scramble. I was in position. Had fuel, had ammunition. Seemed like the right thing to do." "The right thing?" Hathaway's expression softened slightly. "Most men would have run? Tried to save themselves? Most men aren't mechanics' sons, sir. We're taught that machines serve purposes. You don't waste them on nothing, but you don't spare them when something matters. Hathaway nodded, understanding passing between them. Get some rest, Commander. You've earned it. Marcus finished his cigarette, dropped it, crushed it under his boot. His hands had finally stopped shaking. USS Intrepid, November 15th, 1944, 0830 hours. The carrier's intelligence officers initially didn't believe Marcus's after-action report. 5 kills in 1 sortie, engine failure 60 miles from the fleet, dead stick glide across impossible distance, precision ditching within visual range of a destroyer that happened to be in exactly the right position. It sounded like fiction, like propaganda, like the kind of story someone invented to boost morale. Then Lieutenant Hendricks corroborated the first half of the engagement, confirmed Marcus had splashed at least 2 zeros before ordering the damaged Corsairs back to the carrier, confirmed Marcus had turned toward the enemy strike package alone. The Heermann's radar logs confirmed multiple aircraft contacts at the positions and times Marcus described, showed 5 distinct impacts with the water consistent with destroyed aircraft, showed 1 aircraft Marcus's Corsair gliding for approximately 18 minutes before ditching. Captain Hathaway provided a written statement describing the approach and ditching. His executive officer provided detailed observations of the glide performance. 3 sailors from the motor whaleboat crew gave depositions about the rescue. The destroyer's navigator had plotted the locations of 5 oil slicks, 5 separate positions where aircraft had gone into the water, 5 Japanese fighters that would never threaten American ships again. The Navy couldn't ignore it. Within a week, Marcus's tactical innovation using controlled glide performance to extend range beyond rated specifications was classified and analyzed. The technique was added to advanced survival training, not as standard procedure, as emergency option, something to file away for the moment when the engine quit and the ocean was the only runway left. The negative G maneuver Marcus had used during training, the one that had cleared the air bubble from his fuel line 6 years ago, that wasn't in the official report. He'd never used it in combat and never had reason to, not yet. But the seed was planted, the understanding that aircraft could survive maneuvers the manual said were forbidden. That knowing your machine completely meant knowing not just what it should do, but what it could do when survival demanded the impossible. Marcus spent 3 days in the carrier's medical bay, cracked ribs taped, bruised kidneys monitored, mild concussion treated. He slept 16 hours the first day, ate like he'd been starving, drank water until the corpsman told him to stop. Jake visited on the second day, brought cigarettes and news from the squadron. They're calling it the Brennan Glide, Jake said, sitting on the edge of the medical bay cot, grinning like an idiot. Flight instructors are already talking about it. How you stretched a 15,000-foot glide across 60 miles. They're saying it's impossible. It was impossible, Marcus said. His voice was rough. His chest still hurt when he breathed. Just didn't tell the aircraft that. You crazy bastard. You know that completely insane. Probably. Turning back toward 40 enemy aircraft with a dying engine. What the hell were you thinking? Marcus looked at his friend, at the young pilot who'd made it home, who'd survived because Marcus had drawn enemy fighters away, who'd get married and have children and grow old because someone had been willing to fly into impossible odds. I was thinking about weddings, Marcus said quietly. About promises I made. Jake went quiet, understanding dawning in his eyes. Mac, you made it home? That's what matters. That's all that matters. They sat in silence for a moment. The carrier creaked around them. Metal and machinery. Men living in organized chaos. Fighting a war across an ocean that wanted them all dead. The strike package, Marcus said finally. The 40 aircraft, what happened? Jake's expression hardened. Our fighters intercepted them 20 miles from the fleet. Shot down 18. The rest turned back. 1 bomber got through, damaged a destroyer with a near miss. No fatalities. The destroyer's already back on station. We stopped them. You stopped them. You scattered their formation, killed their lead elements, bought us time to scramble. Without that, they would have hit us before we could launch, would have caught half our fighters on the deck, would have been a slaughter. Marcus closed his eyes, saw again the Zero's canopy shattering, the blood inside, the pilot's body slumping. Kill number 41. How many more would there be before this war ended? How long until I'm cleared to fly? Marcus asked. Doc says 2 weeks minimum. Ribs need to heal. You need to pass a flight physical. 2 weeks. 14 days. An eternity in wartime. I'll be back in 1 week, Marcus said. Jake laughed. Sure you will. But Marcus was serious. He'd spent his entire life understanding machines, understanding how they broke, how they healed, how much stress they could take before failure. His body was a machine too, and he knew exactly how far he could push it. Marcus returned to flight status on November 22nd, 8 days after the ditching. His ribs still hurt, his kidneys still ached. But he could breathe without gasping, could move without doubling over, could pass the basic flight physical well enough that the flight surgeon cleared him, reluctantly. You should take more time, the surgeon said. You're still healing. I'm healed enough, Marcus replied. Healed enough to fly, not healed enough to fight. There's a difference. I'll be careful. The surgeon looked at him skeptically. 41 kills. You don't get 41 kills by being careful. Marcus didn't argue, just signed the clearance form and left. His new aircraft was waiting on the flight deck. F4U-1D Corsair, Bureau number 82517, fresh from the factory. 0 hours on the airframe. The R2800 engine purring like a satisfied cat during engine run-up. Marcus spent 2 hours going over every inch of it, checking control surfaces, testing hydraulics, examining fuel lines and oil passages, running his hands over skin panels and structural members, learning this specific aircraft, understanding its quirks, its personality, the way it spoke to him through vibrations and sounds that other pilots wouldn't notice. By the time he climbed into the cockpit for the first time, he knew this Corsair as well as he'd known the one at the bottom of the Philippine Sea. He flew 23 more combat missions between November the 22nd and August 15th, 1945, added 6 more confirmed kills to his record, numbers 42 through 47, survived engine failures, combat damage, bad weather, and enemy fighters that got better as the war went on because only the very best Japanese pilots were still alive by mid-1945, 47 kills total, 9th highest scoring Navy ace of the Pacific War. But it wasn't the kill count that earned him the Navy Cross, it was the innovation. The willingness to push aircraft beyond rated limits when lives depended on it. The understanding that machines could do more than their manuals claimed if the pilot knew them well enough. The negative G split S he'd pioneered in training became legend after the war, not because he'd used it in combat he never needed to, but because instructors taught it as case study, as example of understanding aircraft performance envelopes so completely that you could exceed them deliberately when survival demanded it. Marcus never thought of himself as extraordinary. In the rare interviews he gave late in life, he always said the same thing: I was just a mechanic who learned to fly. The rest was just not panicking when things went wrong. But history remembered differently. August 15th, 1945. Japan surrendered. The war was over. Marcus Brennan was 29 years old, had been in combat for 3 years, had flown 156 combat missions, had survived what most pilots didn't. He went home, back to Duluth, back to the cold winds off Lake Superior, back to the small aircraft repair shop at the municipal airport. His father's shop was smaller than he remembered, older, showing the wear of wartime neglect. But Thomas was there, standing in the hangar door, grey hair, weathered face, those hard eyes that had driven Marcus away 6 years ago. They looked at each other, father and son, separated by years and war and words that couldn't be taken back. Thomas spoke first. Got a Cessna in the hangar with a magneto problem. You remember how to fix one? Marcus smiled. Yeah, Dad, I remember. They worked together that afternoon, side by side, not talking much, just hands on machinery, the familiar rhythm of diagnosis and repair, the smell of oil and aviation fuel, the sound of wrenches on steel, like nothing had changed, like everything had changed. That evening, after they'd cleaned up and locked the hangar, Thomas pulled out 2 bottles of beer, handed one to Marcus. They sat on the workbench, watching the sun set over the airfield. I read about what you did, Thomas said quietly. The glide, the ditching, all of it. Dad, I was wrong. About flying, about you, about what matters. Thomas took a long pull from his beer. You were right. Better to matter than to just survive. You mattered, Dad. You kept me alive. Everything you taught me, that's what brought me home. Thomas looked at his son, really looked. Seeing the man he'd become, the scars, the weight, the knowledge that came from surviving what most men didn't. Your grandfather would be proud, Thomas said. I'm proud. Marcus's throat tightened. He nodded, couldn't speak. They sat in silence until the sun disappeared below the horizon. Father and son. Mechanics both, Understanding finally passed between them without words. Marcus worked in that shop for 3 years, fixed engines, trained new mechanics, never talked about the 47 kills or the ditching or the Navy Cross gathering dust in a drawer in his bedroom. The locals knew he'd been a pilot, a few knew he'd been decorated, but nobody knew the details, and Marcus preferred it that way. In 1948, the Navy called him back, not to fly, to teach. The Advanced Fighter Weapons School at Naval Air Station Miramar needed instructors who understood both the mechanical and tactical aspects of air combat. Marcus fit the profile perfectly. He spent the next 14 years teaching young pilots the same lessons his father had taught him. Understand your machine, know its limits, respect them, and when your life depends on it, know exactly how far you can push beyond those limits without breaking. The negative G split S became a standard lecture in the curriculum, not as a maneuver to attempt, as a case study in understanding aircraft performance envelopes, in knowing your machine so completely that you could ask the impossible from it when death was 2 seconds away. Hundreds of pilots learned from Marcus, thousands learned from his students. How many lives were saved by those lessons? Unknowable, but significant. Marcus retired from the Navy in 1962 with the rank of commander, moved back to Minnesota, married Ellen Whitmore, an elementary school teacher from Duluth, had 2 daughters, ran his father's shop after Thomas passed in 1967, sold it in 1972, spent his retirement restoring vintage aircraft. Corsairs, mostly, when he could find them. He restored 3 complete aircraft between 1972 and 1992, all to flying condition, all sold to museums or private collectors who would care for them properly. He rarely spoke about the war. When asked about the Navy Cross, he changed the subject. When pressed about 47 kills, he'd say, "Just did my job." He never wrote a memoir. Declined multiple interview requests, made one exception in 1989 for a History Channel documentary about Pacific War aces. His only quote, "I was just a mechanic who learned to fly. The rest was luck and not panicking." On April 7, 1994, Marcus Brennan died of a massive heart attack while working on a P-51 Mustang restoration in his garage. He was 78 years old, quick, quiet, surrounded by the machines he'd spent his life understanding. Ellen found him with a wrench still in his hand. The funeral was held at Duluth National Cemetery on a cold April morning. The Navy sent a delegation, full honors, flag-draped casket, 21-gun salute, taps played by a young sailor who'd never met Marcus but understood what he represented. Old squadron mates attended, Jake Hendricks among them, 72 years old now, grey and weathered, but still alive. Still grateful for that day in November 1944 when Marcus had turned back toward impossible odds so his wingman could make it home. Former students attended, some now admirals, some retired, all of them carrying lessons Marcus had taught them, lessons that had kept them alive when mathematics said they should be dead. The eulogies were brief, military, professional. But Jake spoke last, and his words were personal. "Mac saved my life on November 14th, 1944, Jake said, his voice steady despite the tears on his weathered cheeks. "I made it to my wedding because of him. My kids exist because of him. My grandkids exist because of him. He never mentioned it. Never asked for thanks. That was Mac." Jake looked at the flag-draped casket, at the man who'd been his wingman and his friend and his brother in every way that mattered. "He taught me something important, that understanding your machine, really understanding it, could mean the difference between dying and living. I taught that lesson to every pilot I trained. They taught it to their pilots. How many men are alive today? Because Mac knew an engine talks to you if you listen. We'll never know. But it's a lot." The crowd was silent, just the wind off Lake Superior, cold and clean. Jake saluted. "Fair winds and following seas, Mac. You earned your rest." The casket was lowered. The flag was folded. Ellen received it with trembling hands. The delegation dispersed. Back to lives that continued because Marcus had understood machines well enough to push them beyond their limits when it mattered most. The gravestone was simple. Military standard. Commander Marcus Brennan, USN, 1916 to 1994. No mention of kills, no mention of medals, no mention of the innovations that had changed fighter tactics. Just a name, and dates, and the knowledge that he'd mattered. Ellen added one line later, had it carved below the dates. He listened to engines. They told him their secrets. Modern naval aviators still study November 14th, 1944. Not for the kill count impressive, but not unique. for the decision-making under impossible pressure, for the understanding of aircraft performance that allowed Marcus to glide 60 miles on a dead engine, for proof that sometimes the best pilots aren't the naturally talented ones, they're the ones who understand their aircraft completely. The Naval Fighter Weapons School at Miramar Top Gun has a building named Brennan Hall. Inside on the wall is a photograph of an F-4U Corsair and a brass plaque. The plaque reads, Commander Marcus Brennan USN 47, confirmed kills Pacific Theater, 1942 to 1945, Navy Cross recipient, Instructor Advanced Fighter Weapons School, 1948 to 1962. On November 14, 1944, Commander Brennan's aircraft suffered catastrophic engine failure 60 miles from friendly forces while engaging superior enemy numbers. Through expert understanding of aircraft performance characteristics and precise control of glide parameters, he successfully stretched a rated 15,000-foot glide to cover 60 miles, ditching successfully near USS Heermann. His innovation in aircraft performance management saved his life that day and has saved countless lives since through the lessons he taught. His legacy, understanding your machine, can mean the difference between death and survival. Know its limits, respect them, and when necessary, know exactly how far you can exceed them. When the engine quits, gravity's the only power you have left. Use it smart. Thomas Brennan, civilian aircraft mechanic, father of Commander Marcus Brennan. Every class of Top Gun student stands before that plaque on their first day, reads those words, learns that story, and understands that being a fighter pilot means more than flying fast and shooting straight. It means knowing your machine so completely that you and it become one system, one unit, one entity that can accomplish things the manual says are impossible. Marcus never thought of himself as extraordinary, but thousands of pilots who survived because of lessons he taught would disagree. The watch, the pocket watch that had belonged to Marcus's grandfather, the WW2 Pilot, who'd been rejected for bad eyesight, sits in the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, in a climate-controlled display case, protected, preserved. The display card reads, Pocket Watch, carried by Commander Marcus Brennan on 156 combat missions, Pacific Theater, 1942 to 1945. Survived ditching November 14, 1944. Represents 3 generations of aviation grandfather who dreamed of flying father, who enabled its son, who mastered it. This watch symbolizes the lesson Commander Brennan taught. Knowledge passes from generation to generation, mechanic to pilot, father to son, past to future. Understanding machines, truly understanding them, is the foundation of survival. Visitors to the museum stop at that display, read the card, look at the watch, a simple brass timepiece with a worn chain, tarnished green with age, but still ticking, still keeping time, still speaking to those who know how to listen. If you could ask Marcus what he'd want people to remember, he'd probably say nothing. He'd want to be forgotten, to fade into history, like most veterans who did their jobs and came home and lived quiet lives. But if you pressed him, if you demanded an answer, he'd probably say this: remember that machines are tools, they serve purposes, don't waste them on nothing, but don't spare them when something matters. Understand them completely, respect their limits, and when death is 2 seconds away and the manual says, you're finished, remember that manuals are written by engineers who never had to bet their lives on mathematics. You know your machine better than they do. Trust that knowledge. Use every bit of performance it has, not one bit less, not one bit more. And when you land, if you land, thank the mechanics who built it, because they're the ones who made survival possible. They're the foundation everything else stands on. I was just a mechanic who learned to fly. The mechanics who kept my aircraft running, they're the real heroes. But that's not what history remembers. History remembers a pilot who killed 47 enemy aircraft, who glided 60 miles on a dead engine, who taught thousands of pilots that understanding your machine could save your life. History remembers innovation born from understanding, survival born from knowledge, legacy born from teaching. History remembers that when Marcus Brennan's engine quit 60 miles from safety with the ocean waiting below, he didn't panic, didn't pray, didn't give up. He calculated, he adjusted, he flew, and he made it home, not through luck, not through divine intervention, through understanding his machine so completely that he could ask the impossible from it. And it answered. That's the lesson. That's the legacy. That's what matters. 47 kills in the air, but thousands of lives saved on the ground through the knowledge he passed on. Marcus would say the kills don't matter, only the teaching does. But both matter, both are part of who he was, both are part of what he left behind, a mechanic's son from Duluth, Minnesota, who learned to listen to engines, who understood them better than the people who built them, who flew them to their limits and beyond, who survived when mathematics said he shouldn't, who taught others to do the same. That's Marcus Brennan. That's the story. And if this story moved you, if it made you understand something about dedication and understanding and the difference between surviving and mattering, then honor that understanding by sharing it. Tell your sons and grandsons. Tell anyone who'll listen. Tell them that heroes aren't born. They're built from knowledge, from discipline, from fathers teaching sons to listen. Tell them that when everything fails, when the engine quits, and the manual says you're dead, understanding your machine can mean the difference between dying and living. Tell them to listen, to learn, to understand, because the machines talk. They always have. You just have to know their language. And Marcus Brennan spoke that language fluently. Until the day he died with a wrench in his hand and a half-rebuilt engine waiting to be finished, he was still listening, still learning, still understanding. That's all any of us can do. Listen, learn, understand. And when death comes, make sure it's because you ran out of altitude, not because you ran out of ideas. Marcus never ran out of ideas. He ran out of altitude once. On November the 14th, 1944, 60 miles from safety. And even then he turned altitude into distance into time, and time into survival, because he understood his machine completely, absolutely, without question. And that understanding saved his life, just like his father taught him it would.